Good evening, parents and carers and community members of Forest. Welcome to our webinar this evening. And this evening's webinar is focused on child protection and safeguarding at Forest. And before I warmly invite our distinguished guest to speak this evening, I just want to remind you of our webinar that's going to hit Trinity 2 after the half term, which is Tuesday, the 4th of June. And that's going to be led by Alicia Drummond, founder of Teen Tips Wellbeing Hub. I know you've heard her before, and if you haven't, she's a fantastic speaker. And the topic on Tuesday, the 4th of June, is going to focus on family dynamics, buttons and boundaries. So a fantastic webinar for you to log on to on Tuesday, the 4th of June, after a well-deserved rest of half term. I'm not sure where Trinity 1 has gone, but we are now here. And I'm really excited and I feel very honoured to work alongside Mr. Jeff Kayne, who is our Deputy Head for Safeguarding. As one of the Deputy Designated Safeguarding Leads, I learn daily from Jeff. And I'm so glad that he has offered and his suggestion to lead this webinar this evening on such an important topic. And in the words of Jeff, the most important topic for us as a school and us as parents and carers. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Jeff Kayne, who is our Deputy Head Safeguarding. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Milton. Good evening, everybody. I hope you're really well. I do tend to talk in catchphrases, so Miss Milton's given you one, and I'm pretty confident I'll give you a few more during the course of this webinar. Thank you for joining us to discuss safeguarding and child protection. First of all, a very quick introduction to me. If you don't know me, my name is Mr. Jeff Kayne. I'm the Deputy Head Teacher and Designated Safeguarding Lead at Forest School. This is my 12th year at the school. My responsibilities go across all ages at the school. So from our very youngest pupils, our 4-year-olds, right up to our 19-year-olds. And I'm responsible for safeguarding child protection. I'm responsible for our provision of mental health support. And I also oversee the work that we do in equality, diversity and inclusion. And I do quite a lot of these webinar things because I'm accredited by the NSPCC as a safeguarding child protection trainer, which was a course of around 18 months, which involved 10 learning days, and then an assessed session where I delivered a session to 25 delegates from lots of different schools, and the NSPCC grades you. And at this time of A-levels and GCSEs, I'm pleased to say that I passed. So if anything, I hope the 50 minutes or so that we spend together isn't going to be rubbish. I also get out on my travels, so my priority is absolutely Forest, and I deliver all the training at Forest, working with my very hard-working colleagues as members of our Safeguarding Child Protection team. But I'm fortunate enough to work with some other schools to deliver some training for them, and indeed to do a little bit of consultation. That's Kingston Grammar School, and there's a few others here. Very recently, I've delivered a webinar on behalf of the Safeguarding Alliance, who are the leaders in the industry, if you will, around consulting and expertise in safeguarding child protection. And lastly, I'm very proud to offer supervision to a brand newly installed designated safeguarding lead at the London Academy of Excellence. So once a month, we spend an afternoon together and we do some training, and I help him to work through some of his cases. It's a great experience to be able to work with other schools, but I want to let Forest parents and carers know that the real advantage for us is I'm stealing all their good ideas. So as well as sharing learning, I'm able to bring back lots of their best practice as well, and hopefully embed that at Forest. So what is our menu this evening? Well, first of all, I want to do an introduction to safeguarding child protection. I'd like to show you exactly how it works for us at Forest. To discover hot topics and top tips, I want to try and give you some things to take away. Some of them will be very obvious. One or two of them might be new and or helpful. And then just before we start, whenever I do safeguarding child protection training, I just want to mention self-care issue. It's important, and I'm fully aware that in our houses, we all have elements of safeguarding and or child protection. So I ask you just to look after yourself, although I won't be going into any content that should be difficult for anybody during the course of the session. And the other thing I want to mention is acronyms. Now, the world of safeguarding and child protection is filled with acronyms, and I know from direct experience that people don't like acronyms. I will try my best not to use them, but occasionally I may fall into the trap of using an acronym. But here goes. So let's kick off. And of course, we have our suite of policies that are available to parents and carers. The vast majority are available on the website. And if there are any additional policies that you would like to see, then please don't hesitate to contact our Director of Compliance, Mr. Wayne Bishop, and he will provide that information to you. We have to speak to the statutory guidance, and there are two absolutely essential pieces of guidance that govern safeguarding child protection in all schools, whether that's a maintained school or state sector school, independent, pupil referral unit, special school. And it's called Keeping Children Safe in Education. And it's updated every year. And over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been some pretty major updates. I'm pleased to say that this year, I'm reliably informed that there'll be only a tweak for 2024. And it's broken into 5 parts. The first one is what all staff have to know, and that is all staff, from our hardworking operations staff to our pre-prep, our prep, our senior school. Everybody involved in working at Forest has to read that information. Part 2 is the work I do and the team, and it's the management of safeguarding. And it also has specific things in place that the governors, who ultimately hold responsibility for this, have to abide by. Part 3 is safer recruitment. Part 4 is what that we do in relation to the adults working with the children at Forest School. And the last one, very importantly, and has had a very significant update over the last 2 or 3 years, is child-on-child abuse and child-on-child sexual abuse. And I'm going to mention a little bit of that a bit more later. There are also annexes which are really helpful in terms of things such as online safety, very clear directions to school, and also the role of the designated safeguarding lead. So if you want to know more around what I should be doing and what our team should be doing, then Annex C is quite clear. I'm going to mention that very soon. The second very large piece of statutory guidance is working together to safeguard children. And what this statutory legislation does is it maps out what schools must do in order to work with external agencies. There are 3 statutory partners, the 3 people who actually are overall responsible for safeguarding child protection. They are police, they are health, and they are children's services. And this is the document that maps how schools, as a co-opted partner, work with those statutory partners. Now, this has had a big update in the last 6 months. It was actually December 23, and it's in 6 chapters. And the ones that are most important to us are 1 and 2 in relation to working as part of a network. And I hope during the course of this webinar, you'll feel reassured about the amount of times we are working as part of a multi-agency. I thought it might be interesting for you to know what staff have to know, and this is all staff. So first of all, as I mentioned, they have to read Keeping Children Safe in Education, Part 1. It's about 40 pages long. They have to read that every year, and they have to sign off that they've read that every year. Now, I ask Forest staff to read Part 5 every year. That's child-on-child abuse, so that they have an indication of signs, of symptoms, how to report, what is the school's responsibility in relation to working with external agencies. That's something we do in-house. And safeguarding child protection isn't governed by a single policy. It's governed by the statutory guidance. It's governed by the safeguarding child protection policy. But here are also some policies that absolutely underpin all the work that we do in relation to keeping people safe at Forest. You'll be pleased to know that staff get a quiz every year out of 50. All staff have to complete it, operations staff, pre-prep, prep and senior school staff. And what that is because we've really worked hard to embed the culture, this is a brilliant way of checking my training and whether there are any gaps. So, for example, if people are getting the same question wrong, that allows me to respond to that and to tweak the training to make sure we're plugging any gaps that they have in their knowledge. Let's get into the detail here. So keeping children safe says, paragraph 2, it is everyone's responsibility. Everyone at Forest School has a role to play, and the work that we do is child-centred. What we're required to do is work in the best interest of the child. Paragraph 3 says it doesn't matter if somebody can see every piece of information about a child. They still don't have all the necessary information. And actually, it might be another practitioner, let's say a visiting music teacher or a sports coach or Anne in the sixth form cafe. It might be somebody else that has specific detail. So that's why it has to be a culture. And paragraph 15 of the guidance says it could happen here. And that's the attitude that we're told that we must adopt. I wish it said it does happen here, because wherever there's children, there's child protection. And that's exactly what we find. Very simply, we give staff a language. 4 R's are a very simple way of starting it. We want them to recognize that something's going on. We talk in great detail around how known, liked and valued underpins every bit of work we do in pastoral care. And that means we get to know the young people in our care, and we should be able to recognize if something's changed or if something's going on. And once we've recognized, we need to do something. We need to respond. So we need to have a conversation. And we want to do that straight away, earliest intervention, as discreet and as skillful as possible, just to check in. Once that's happened, we ask staff to record what's going on, to write it down. We give information about capturing the pupil's voice, in inverted commas. And then what they're doing is they're referring into the safeguarding child protection team and waiting for guidance. So the 4 R's is a very simple framework that we ask our staff to live by. Right, here's the university challenge question. Safeguarding child protection are often used interchangeably, and actually they mean completely different things. And one of my major aims out of this webinar tonight is for the Forest community to become very comfortable in safeguarding. Safeguarding is all proactive. Safeguarding is everything we do at Forest School to keep children safe from harm. You'll see words like protect, prevent, and ensure that they grow up in circumstances consistent with provision of safe and effective care. Safeguarding is taking action. Safeguarding is always happening. In fact, it's 97% of all the work that we do. It's things such as safer recruitment of staff. It's things like our access to the internet and our responsible use policy. It's our behaviour policy. This is safeguarding. This webinar, safeguarding is all proactive support. It's everything that's going on all the time. So child protection is actually different. Child protection is reactive. Child protection is much more difficult. It's around 3% of the work we do. And what this means is we're now in a position where something has happened. Something has happened to the child, and we're working with external agencies in order to ensure that that child can thrive. And there are essentially 3 categories of child protection. The first one is early help, working with an external agency in order to try and get the best form of support at the earliest opportunity. Early help can be family therapy, it can be counselling. There are lots of different things that early help can be, hopefully short term. There's then the 2 more serious aspects of child protection. Child in need is where there would be a child protection conference every 3 months, working with children's services in order to help a family and that child to secure the best outcome. And the last one is child at risk of immediate harm. Of course, this is the most serious end of child protection, where the safeguarding child protection team have to ensure we follow the guidance in order to ensure that all necessary steps are taken right at the start. There are 4 categories of child abuse as defined by law. The first one is physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. which is the ongoing failure to meet a child's basic physical and psychological needs. I think it is true, and I've worked in different settings from state-maintained school. I was a governor in a special school. I've done some work with pupil referral units. I think from the independent sector, we certainly experience physical abuse, emotional abuse, and indeed sexual abuse. I would say that we experience fewer cases of traditional neglect, which is dirty, smelly, hungry. Occasionally we do experience them, but there are fewer cases. It is true that we've sometimes experienced something called affluent neglect, whereby a family have all the means in order to help with the child. However, they may not be meeting the psychological and physical needs of that young person. It is important to point out that these 4 categories of child abuse apply to children. So that's everybody under the age of 18. And of course, some parents and carers on the call will know that around about 100 of our pupils are currently over 18, particularly those who are sitting their A-level exams. And that means we need to be across the categories of adult abuse. And myself and the head of sixth form, Kate Spencer-Ellis, are both trained in adult safeguarding as well, because the terms are different. And there are actually 10 categories of adult abuse. And when we work with adult services, we need to be able to speak the same language. We need to be able to talk the talk with them. We tell our staff, and I'm going to share this with parents, carers, the sorts of things to look out for. And these will be things that many families on the call may well have already experienced. So these are signs that may indicate that additional support is required. What I would say, bearing in mind our definition of safeguarding child protection, these things are always safeguarding. They are sometimes child protection. And as well as being safeguarding, sometimes they can be part of adolescents growing up, and they will experience peaks and troughs in relation to, for example, mental health. So let's bring it into Forest in terms of how safeguarding child protection is organised with us. So Marvel have their Avengers. We have our safeguarding child protection team, and they are incredibly hardworking, committed and dedicated group, and the school, I believe, are very fortunate to have such an outstanding team. My role is DSL, Designated Safeguarding Lead. That means that ultimately responsibility lies with me, and I have to be fully involved in what's going on. We have Deputy Designated Safeguarding Leads. So everyone there is a DDSL, Deputy Designated Safeguarding Lead. And what that means is that they're all trained the DSL level, and they lead within their section. So we always have 2 people working in every case. And an example that I often give here is our pre-prep. So if you look at Mr. Faulkner there, Mr. Faulkner is head of pre-prep. If we have a situation of safeguarding child protection in the pre-prep, that's our youngest children, we need the local expert to be leading. Mr. Faulkner knows families, he knows pupils, he knows siblings, he knows lunchtime supervisors, he knows catering staff. It's incredibly important that Mr. Faulkner is leading on that case, but he and I will be working completely on it together. I might be helping with some decisions that we're taking, and indeed we will constantly be in communication. And the same applies for everybody working within the sections. Amanda Gale is our school project manager for our counselling provision. It's essential that we have both of our learning support specialists on the Safeguarding Child Protection team to ensure that we are making sure best outcomes are in place for pupils with special educational needs and disabilities. Mr. Bishop, our head of compliance, Dr. Maggie, our director of medical provision, and lastly, our school office manager, the eyes and ears of the school. Mrs. Woolston-Holm knows everything, and therefore it's absolutely essential she is one of our hardworking DDSLs. I also meet formally with the warden every week purely on safeguarding child protection. So as I said at the start, I have other parts of my remit, but the DSL is by far the biggest part. And therefore I meet with the warden every Tuesday morning to go through things for that week that he needs to be aware of and be across. What is the role of the designated safeguarding lead and the deputy DSL team? Well, because I'll check with your homework with the test at the end, Annex C of Keeping Children Safe is quite clear here. It talks about having things in place around availability, making sure that Both in term time and outside term time, we do have the availability of DSLs and DDSLs. That also includes for things like trips. So there's safeguarding checks that happen before trips. And of course, we would be available if a safeguarding child protection matter became apparent. The DSL is responsible for managing referrals and ultimately making assessments around reporting to children's services involving health, involving the police. And the sort of generic working with others phrase is just in terms of making sure that the DSL and the DDSLs are the champions of safeguarding child protection and are passionate and are willing to share and engage with others. I'm going to give you a bit more information around who we work with on a regular basis. Of course, managing the safeguarding and child protection files is a critical part of the role, and ensuring that our information sharing is appropriate and is there in order to secure best outcomes. Raising awareness, being very passionate around safeguarding child protection, ensuring that staff have training, knowledge and the skills in order to do this work. I do field disclosure, so pupils do come into me, but not every pupil. And I want pupils to go to exactly who they feel comfortable with. So if that is their physics teacher, then I need to be sure that that physics teacher has the necessary training and skills to be able to field that disclosure and look after that young person. Of course, I provide support to staff on a regular basis. And lastly, and most importantly, let's bring it back to what we have to do. We are there to act in the best interest of the children, and understanding the views of the children and capturing their voice is absolutely critical. I'm a massive fan of Ted Lasso on Apple TV. I hope some of you have seen it. For those of you who haven't seen it, there are 3 seasons. I definitely stop at the end of season 2. I think season 3, they lose the plot. But see, up to season 2, I think there are some really lovely moments. And there's a lovely moment in season 1 where Ted is essentially explaining that people have underestimated him his whole life. And he uses this phrase from a Walt Whitman poem, which is be curious and not judgmental. And actually, that is what I use to train our safeguarding team, because we're not here to judge. That's not the role of the safeguarding child protection team. Our role is to be professionally curious and to try and work out how we can help young people and indeed their families when things are difficult. So that's what I hope families can expect for us, to be curious, but never judgmental in any way, shape or form. Where is our network? I've spoken quite a lot already about being plugged into external agencies and making sure the school is never on your own. Well, firstly, we're quite a complicated beast. Because we're an independent school and because our pupils come from all around London, 360, 40 minutes or so, we tend to deal with 8 to 10 local authorities every year. That can sometimes be 12, that can sometimes be 6. Because if we're making a referral into children's services, we refer to the home borough. So that could be Waltham Forest, Redbridge, Hackney, Haringey, Highbury and Islington, Essex, all different local authorities that we work with on a regular basis. The multi-agency safeguarding hub, or MASH, is the new fancy term for children's services. That essentially is a triage. So we call them and they decide whether they proceed with an assessment or not. If they do proceed with assessment, they will pass the case to long-term social services, and they'll be there working with the family, and they will invite the school to attend multi-agency meetings and reviews. Of course, we work with health partners, we work with hospitals, we work with hospital schools for some of our young people who are recovering from illness, and that's a very important part of the work. And again, it's so important that the school is there. We also sometimes work with private practitioners, of course, to try and get the best outcome for parents and carers. And we would invite parents and carers to tell us who the young people are working with, so that we can get together and create a real 360 view. We have Place to Be on site, which is our 5-day-a-week counselling provision. And we're delighted to have that. And Amanda is the most fantastic school project manager. We are fortunate to have 8 to 9 visiting counsellors who join us. We offer one-to-one counselling for young people, short to mid-term work, 8 to 12 sessions. We also have a self-referral for young people who want to go and have a chat. No matter is too small. So at the moment, if somebody wishes to discuss some anxiety around exams, we absolutely would be delighted for them to make that appointment. I should mention as well that Place to Be also provide a service for staff. And what that is, it is not counselling for the adults in our setting. That's done by another provider. But what it is it's there to allow staff to talk through long-term cases that they happen to be working with. So if you're a senior school tutor and you're working with a young person and their family over long-term mental health concerns, that can be very difficult for the member of staff as well. So that service is there to, if you will, provide supervision, to provide support, and allow the adult to process in order to be the best version of themselves for the young person. There are times when we have to refer to CAMHS. So our Place to Be service is our earliest intervention, 8 to 12 weeks. Some cases require more specialist. They're more complex, they're more long-term, at which point we would refer out to CAMHS, acronym check, Child Adolescent Mental Health Service. Again, you refer to the home local authority, so we're often working with 8 to 10 every year. We work really closely with the police, and I'm delighted to say we have a Safer Schools police officer, and PC Paulina is there on the phone if we need some advice. What we can't report things to Safer Schools. That's not what they are. They are a proactive safeguarding service, if you like. So we can seek advice from them. We sometimes arrange for Safer Schools to come in and meet with our pupils. It's a really good two-way arrangement that works very well. Sometimes when we're at the most serious end, once we've reported a matter, particularly around sexual assault, we would be working with the specialist Sapphire unit and the child abuse investigation team. Across all London boroughs, there's a relatively new service called Operation Encompass, which has been a fantastic add to the provision for schools. So what this is that if the police visit a home as a result of an incident around domestic abuse and the pupil is present, they will inform me as DSL the following morning by 9:30. Now that is a confidential share between professionals, which means that we can then absolutely get in our lane. And our lane is to support the young person in our care. This has been incredibly helpful because, as you will know, there are lots of reasons why sometimes families don't share certain information with schools. We're not here to judge in any way, shape or form. We're totally open to work with any families, and we know what we are supposed to do, which is to look after the young people in our care. We have a fantastic local authority designated officer in Waltham Forest. Caroline is the head of safeguarding, if you like. The major remit is making sure all adults are doing the right thing with children, but Caroline is also a source of support, and we will consult her on cases, on information, on external referrals on a regular basis. We also are working really closely with inpatient services, eating disorder clinics, and of course, external counselling. It's important that we talk about safeguarding, and I know parents and carers will be plugged into media reports, and it is true nationwide, things like eating disorders have been increasing, and absolutely Forest will see that as well. So being able to work with the right people at the right time and work in partnership with families is absolutely essential to everything that we do. All good schools say, come and talk to us. All good schools say, if you have an issue, we've got an open door policy, speak to your tutor, speak to your head of house, speak to your deputy head of section, speak to your head of section. We felt over the last 3 to 4 years that that's great, but actually let's go even more. So what we're saying to your child and children is speak to us if you have any issues, but if you don't want to speak to us, speak to somebody. So we provide these, what we call digital partners. Young people can text to the crisis line, which is run by Shout and is very well respected. There's online counselling provided by an excellent organisation called Kooth. We've worked closely with an app called Tell Me with over 80,000 users now, which is fully moderated peer-to-peer support. A really lovely opportunity for young people to help each other. Just to clarify, every comment that goes on the platform is moderated by an adult. So somebody says something, it's checked, there's a delay, it then goes up, and then young people from all over will chip in and offer support. Every comment is moderated. And lastly, our very good friends at Papyrus, who are the experts in suicide prevention, and indeed will support families by doing things like a suicide prevention plan online. And we really recommend that families work with these experts. And indeed, if pupils don't want to talk to us directly, they can seek support from somewhere. Let's get under the bonnet. So one of the things I want to do, and we've never done this at Forest, I thought it'd be interesting if we showed you some of the data, which means that you'll be able to actually see some of the work and to understand primarily the difference between safeguarding and child protection. So first of all, here's a graph showing this year the work that we do. And I hope you can see very clearly that, quite rightly, as a school, the thing we do most is speak to your children. So 25% of work done by the whole school. So this is not just the safeguarding team. This is operations staff, pre-prep staff, prep staff, senior school staff. Thousands of things that are recorded. The vast majority of things that we do, the largest thing that we do is pupil communication. A close second is parent-carer comms, and it has to be. And the third category there is internal information share. So this is where we're actually talking to each other. And you can see how those three things really dominate in terms of the numbers of all the work we do in safeguarding child protection. I think it's shown by this even better. And this is, so all I do is get the numbers, and a very clever colleague by the name of Tegan Gears makes this happen. And I'm very grateful to Tegan for her excellent support and intellect. So this shows mapping it from when we started using our safeguarding software in 2018 and 2019 to where we are now. And I think it's fair to say, and I know this in speaking to some of the other schools that I mentioned at the start, nobody really knew how to use the software when we first started. And actually schools have to adjust and adapt and create process and policies. So what this graph is showing is it's showing an increase in the way that we record and the way that we do things. It's absolutely not showing an exponential growth in child protection matters. Let me quantify that. So here, these top four categories, that is something to celebrate, I think. So the top category is this year is pupil communication. Now, those of you who are across data will notice that there's been quite a steep increase in pupil communication. That's simply because we weren't recording it quite right. So there are other categories here like raise a concern or internal information share, where a lot of the pupil conversations were being hidden. And I wanted this year to really capture that fantastic work. The number of times young people are choosing to speak to trusted adults at school. So that's why that increase has happened, because we're recording it and capturing it better. The next one is parent-carer comms. The next one is internal information share. And the next one is place to be. All proactive, all safeguarding. The next section, if you like, is operations. So that's essentially the work that's happening in school in terms of attendance, the work that's happening in terms of working with external agencies, the work that's being reporting where staff might notice something, which is our raise of concern category. Good schools must monitor and record child-on-child abuse and have categories in place. Any school that says it doesn't happen is completely wrong, because again, where there's children, unfortunately, we're going to see cases of bullying and other aspects of child-on-child abuse. Therefore, a school must record it and be able to move their training in order to respond to certain trends and patterns. The thing that's most important here is this line here, which is, I'm just going to do that again because I think that's quite nice. That's child protection. So you can see, irrespective of the rise that has come because we're getting much better at using the software and so much more emphasis is put on communication. But this is child protection, and it has remained constant all the way through. And that's actually what it should be. So it should be less than 3% of the work. This is at the very serious, the most serious end of safeguarding child protection, and that has stayed completely constant. In terms of getting support, when we start, these are agencies that we've added, so new agencies that we put onto the software. So you see, in the first year, there was approximately 60 new agencies that we found. And that means that, you know, people who can provide some extra work, maybe some mentoring, maybe some support around attendance, maybe some extra mental health support, working with new and different educational facilities within hospitals. Those are what the agencies are. Now, this year, we've only added a new 10. It will come to a point where we'll begin to plateau because we've added so many. But parents and carers, what I wanted to show you is we now have 186 agencies on our books, which means that we reach out to different agencies in different local authorities to secure support. What this also means is how many we work with every year. So it's around 40 specific different agencies that we work with in any one year. And again, I hope that's offering reassurance to the families with us. And I know there are some new Forest families who are joining us in September, that we know how to network with our local community. I thought you might be interested to know what staff are told about fielding a disclosure, when a young person tells them something. So first of all, we've got to be really clear that we're going to share it. Nothing's confidential in this space. Nothing's going to be kept a secret. I don't like the word confidential. I think it's a scary word for young people. So we ask staff to tell them the name of the member of staff they're going to tell. Thank you very much for telling me this. I'm going to share this with Miss Leshmer-Smith because I know she'll be able to help you. We ask them to kick into active listening and to be reassuring, to be human, to say thanks so much, you're doing really well, to make sure your child or children have a glass of water or a tissue, and actually be there for them in that moment. They're trained not to ask leading questions or any sense of putting words in the child's mouth by accident. And how do we do this? We try and let the silence do the heavy lifting. I talk about 80-20. So the child should be talking for 80%, the adult 20%. And I think in terms of parents and caring, that's quite a useful ratio as well. I know from my own experience, sometimes we overtalk. And actually remembering the 80-20 ratio, let them talk 80% of the time, you actually get a lot more. And use prompt questions. So things such as what, who, when, where, how. We try to avoid at all costs the word why in safeguarding. The people might not know why. And also why is quite an emotive question. There may be fear, embarrassment, anger, all sorts of things on the question why. So we try to avoid that. We ask staff to identify, is this child at risk of immediate harm? And if so, let's get one of the safeguarding team to you immediately before you write it up. 99.9% of things are not at that urgency threshold, so therefore colleagues write it up. And then they wait for guidance. And that's how it works at Forest School. Recently, I've started giving advice around staff after the disclosure, because sometimes it can be tense, and parent carers might recognise this as well. So sometimes if a child tells you something, and then a day or two later, it feels tense, it feels a bit awkward, and we've got to try and build that bridge again. So I say to staff, acknowledge it. Don't allow there to be an elephant in the room. Say, how's things? Thanks for telling me that. How are things for you right now? That helps to move things on. Using open questions like, how are you doing? How was the match? Or how was the drama event, etc. Just allows the conversation to get going. We ask colleagues to reassure the young people that, nothing's changed in this professional relationship. I'm absolutely here to support. And sometimes, like adults, young people just need time. They need time and space in order to process something that they might have been hanging on to or has been a secret for them for quite a long time. And they've taken the brave and courageous chance in order to share it with a trusted adult. I thought it might be useful to just bring it back to some hot topics. And these, I think, are the ones that are most clear and present in our mind as a safeguarding team. And I did a webinar in September solely on mental health. And I'd really encourage any families that didn't see that to go back and have a look at that. I wanted to spend a moment talking about school avoidance behaviour, which nationwide is on the increase, a mention of online safety, and child-on-child abuse. So in terms of mental health, what can you do? What can we do together? Well, we can have a shared language. The Mental Health First Aid England gave a framework, the ALGE framework, which is something I'm about to explain, to really refine that active listening skills, to turn down our voices, 80-20, let the young people talk, to use coaching style questions, what and how in particular, and to communicate really closely with school so that we know exactly how we can help and indeed what support families require from us. ALGE is really simple. We've got the young person at the centre. Everything should be child-centred. First of all, we're going to ask, What can we do? What's going on? How are things? What do you think the situation's like? Then we're going to listen, 80-20, turning on our active listening. Then we're going to give support, give reassurance, actually do something to offer our support. Then we're going to enable them to access support. So for us, that may well be working with an external agency. That may well be working with Place to Be. That may well be establishing peer mentoring, but we're going to enable some form of support. And we're also going to encourage self-care, because I, like you, parents and carers, firmly believe in these children and young people. And I think this generation are fantastic, and they can do stuff, and they really can take ownership. They have agency. So let's encourage them to come up with their own strategies, because they're the most powerful. Just a reminder around the 3 types of listening. Me listening. This is what we want the young people to do when they're talking to us. We actually want them to articulate their innermost thoughts. We want them to be doing me listening. We want adults to turn down me listening, because me listening gets in the way. And it's things like, oh, what question shall I ask? You know, I've got a lot to do. I've got a lot on. I'm busy. I've heard this before. That me listening's not helpful. We've got to turn that right down, and we've got to allow them to do me listening. And what we should be turning up is micro listening, listening to the words, and macro listening, listening to everyone else, the energy, the tone, what is not being said. Sometimes we can notice things. So sometimes young people do things on particular words, and sometimes I will say, "Oh, I noticed you put your hands together when you said that. Is that anything?" And sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is. And I've had lots of cases where young people have said, "Oh yeah, this is the bit I'm finding most difficult," or this is the bit I really want to tell you. So the key here is to oscillate between micro and macro. I personally am much more comfortable in macro listening. I like being able to see body language. That's why sometimes speaking to a screen in a webinar I find really difficult. So I'm trying to continuously do better in terms of micro. But try it, oscillate between listening to the words and noticing things that are not being said. And try and focus on this effective questions, short and open questions, using these excellent prompt questions and avoiding why as much as possible. As much as why is often the strongest instinct we have, why it can really be unhelpful, particularly in a safeguarding child protection sphere. A word on school avoidance behaviour. Now, this is a national picture, and it's in the media and it's in the press a lot at the moment. Indeed, there was an alarming article in The Guardian at the end of February that estimated nearly a third of UK secondary pupils avoid school due to anxiety in a survey that was done. First of all, I want to make it really clear, I'd like all forest community to understand this. This has in the past been really misunderstood, and actually something that we call labelling, where there's been a term used which has labelled a child or a young person. And that term used to be school refuser. And some of us, we remember that term from our own school days. It's a terrible term. Let's delete it. Let's never speak of it again, because it's a label. And actually the issue here is school avoidance behaviour. And in nearly all cases, the actual term that is better and more relevant is emotionally based school avoidance, because it's very often linked to some anxiety. It's very often linked to perhaps some element of depression. It very, very rarely, in fact, I'm not sure I can think of a case where it has existed on its own. Whilst it will take time to try and identify what those things are, and I'm afraid it'll take even longer in order to try and resolve those things, it is almost always underpinned by emotionally based school avoidance. Now, this is where we have to work really closely, because this can be really long and can be really difficult to actually address. And lots of things can be tried and lots of things may not work. And it will feel for families that you take one step forward and then 2 steps back. Please know the school is with you. We're here. We have lots of expertise. We have lots of experience in this area. What we don't have is an immediate magic wand, and we'll never tell you that we have that. So we need to work really closely together. We are very mindful that as difficult as this can be for safeguarding child protection team, for tutors, for heads of house, for teaching assistants, for class teachers, this actually is much harder for the family. So let's work really closely together. And this is where long-term, high-impact pastoral care is what's required. Online safety. What can you do? Well, I'm sure you do lots. The most important thing I would say is get them talking. I spoke this week to the lower school, year 7 and year 8. I set a middle school tutor time a couple of weeks ago, and Miss Spencer sent out a wonderful video to the sixth form around online safety, specifically filter and monitoring that we'll talk about in a couple of slides' time. Get them talking. Certainly in my house, the only real tension that existed was around phones. What we have to do is we try and get to an understanding whereby when they're looking at the screens and they're doing stuff and they smile or they laugh or their face expression changes and we notice it, we should be able to say, oh, what's going on? What are you up to? If they shut us down and say, oh, don't worry about it, or, you know, it's nothing to do with you, etc., then that's an issue. And that's something we'll want to pick up with them. If they're saying to us, oh, I'm chatting to such and such on Snapchat, we're talking about this thing, or I'm online gaming with people, etc., then at least there is a conversation, there's a dialogue, and that's much more powerful than trying to go straight in with a kind of a punitive approach. Let's try and understand exactly what they're doing. Try and get them to engage in co-constructing the roles. They know things around the constant bombardment of social media. They will tell you at great length the positives around connectivity. And of course, that's absolutely true. But the issue around that constantly being on, the tension of should I reply, should I swipe, they'll see that I've read it. That emotional energy is the thing that is most concerning. So I think co-constructing any rules around dual screens, around when they're supposed to be revising. Of course, it's tricky in terms of them having these apps, etc., on their devices as well as on their phones. So I think families do need to make sure they've got some protections in place. Parent carer controls, in order to be clear about what they're doing, perhaps Wi-Fi and router settings, which all providers can do. I would ask you all to consider data plans as well. So I'm about to explain that we've made some changes to improve our network at Forest School. What we don't want is pupils necessarily to go on unlimited data plans and to tether their laptop to their phone. So really consider those things, because that's where the school and parents carers have to work really closely. Neither of us are more responsible for online safety than the other. It falls with both of us. And that brings us to our changes of filtering monitoring on the school network. So first of all, what does that mean? Well, very importantly, our filtering and monitoring stuff only applies when pupils' devices are physically on the school network. There's nothing on their device. There's no monitoring or filtering when they're not on the school network. What this means is filtering is content control. It stops them accessing specific websites. And how does that work? Well, it works in relation to specific categories. So websites are given these categories. And then if somebody hits one of those categories, then that website will be blocked and it will be recorded on our system. Now, I want to reassure families that filtering works really, really well. Sometimes it's not perfect, which means that there are some absolutely legitimate websites that pupils are trying to access that get blocked in the filter. They just need to tell us and we'll unblock it. Although the law says we have to filter and monitor our network, the law is also clear that it shouldn't restrict academic learning. So they just need to tell their tutor or their class teacher in the prep school, and we will get that unblocked. In our most recent update to filtering, Wordle got stuck in the filter. I don't know why, and there were some real issues for people for a day or two. So we'll just get it unblocked. But it has to be there in order to ensure they can't access specific material online while they're on the school network. Monitoring is the really clever bit. So this is the significant update that we've done in order to ensure that our systems are high impact. And again, this only applies when they're on the school device, when they're on the school network. Monitoring is a way of capturing searches that again fall into the categories. So I've had taken time to explain to pupils that nobody can see what they're doing, nobody's looking at their information or their browser or anything at all. But what there are is there's a series of words within these categories, and if somebody types in those words into Google, we will get an alert, and that will allow us to respond. Or not. Because actually I get an alert. So the alert comes through. The vast majority, 90% of the alerts that I've had over the last few weeks are curriculum based. So EPQ, HPQ, RSHE, they're all about the curriculum. Absolutely excellent. We want people to be doing those things. Please carry on. 90% of the stuff. I'd say 6 or 7% of the stuff is kind of personal searches. They hit the category, but they're asking questions. They're being inquisitive. There is absolutely no safeguarding concern whatsoever, but it's a personal search. And again, no response required. In 4% or so of the cases, we may decide to check in. And this is a safeguarding check-in. So this is not around behavior. This is a safeguarding check-in where somebody might be researching something over and over again, but we think, actually, we want to check they're okay. And the conversation will be, just, this has come up in the alerts, we'll be totally transparent. Can you tell me a bit more about the search? And again, some of them are perfectly legitimate, and some of them have led to really outstanding safeguarding child protection, keeping young people safe on our network. Just a quick word on behaviour. So it has thrown up a little thing which has been there since the start of time, where in the olden days, somebody may have written something in somebody's book. Occasionally, young people type something in somebody else's laptop. Now the system works, so the alert comes through. Can I just ask all parents and carers to make sure to know that that is not acceptable? We don't want to do it. We're taking a very common sense approach to it. But what they should be doing is focusing on the lessons. So it's very rare, but I just share that with parents, carers, in case you get wind of that. Help us to make sure they don't do that. I'm going to finish on child and child abuse. And the key to child and child abuse is understanding that there are specific categories in law. And we have worked really hard over the last 3 years on this. There was an excellent review done by Ofsted, a rapid review of child abuse in schools, that gave some significant recommendations to school. The major criticism of really good schools who were involved in it, and there was about 30 who were chosen. Forest wasn't one of them. There was a number that were chosen because they had a significant number of testimonies on the website, Everyone's Invited, or Ofsted decided to approach those schools. They were from all types of settings as well. And we've worked very hard on this to respond to the recommendations. And the major criticism of the schools, who were doing, lots of them were doing very good work as well, was not working with external agencies. Schools have to work with external agencies and have to take advice. And parents and carers, I'd like us to use the same language. So bullying, of course, is there, and that includes online, prejudice-based and indeed discriminatory bullying. The guidance also talks about teenage relationship abuse. So this is issues around control, coercion, somebody having somebody's password, not allowing them to be on social media, saying that certain photos have to be taken down. That's what that means. Physical abuse, sexual violence and sexual harassment will be understood by the community. Issues around consent, and we've spent a lot of time changing, adapting, improving our RSHE provision in the senior school under the excellent lead of Miss Arthur as head of RSHE and Miss Green as assistant head of RSHE, to ensure that consent is taught age and stage appropriate and spiraled, so that what is being delivered to our year 13s is absolutely appropriate to them and age and stage. I've done webinars actually on youth-produced sexual imagery. This is sharing nudes and semi-nudes, and there's very clear guidance. This is happening very regularly. It's very commonplace, and we have to try and encourage young people to self-regulate and to make effective decisions online in the same way that they would in person. I want to draw the community's attention to upskirting, which was made illegal in England in 2019. It was actually illegal in Scotland around about 10 years before that. And this is absolutely critical that young people understand this and do not make mistakes. And we've done some really good work, I think, in the last week with our year 10s in relation to understanding what it is, what happens in relation to if there were to be a disclosure around upskirting, and how we would work with external agencies. Very important that we do our best to be proactive here to keep young people safe. And the last category of child and child abuse is initiation and hazing. It tends to live in things like sports clubs. It hasn't been at Forest School in my time, but obviously it could be. But I would ask parents and carers to be aware of sports clubs, or indeed when young people travel to universities, just to be clear around any initiation ceremony or anything that is part of a culture, an unhealthy and toxic culture of joining some kind of club or society. If a child is under 18 and there's any type of humiliation involved in that, that could be illegal. And obviously there'll be serious concerns about any adult. All clubs have a child protection officer or a designated safeguarding lead, and parents carers should know who that person is if you have any concerns with the practice of a club. I'm going to come into land. I want to make sure you can all get to the one show at 7 p.m. And I want to finish on the backbone of forest provision, which of course has to be the collaboration between high impact pastoral care and safeguarding child protection. And the foundations are exactly the same, that every child and young person at Forest feels safe and secure. That won't always be the case when something is breaking, for example, but we will get to a point by getting excellent and expert support so that every child feels safe and secure. That we go with the principles of earliest intervention, trying to get to something before it becomes a thing, before it becomes a bigger thing. Not always possible, but if we can respond at the earliest possible opportunity, then that's going to be in the best interest of the young person. We have to work with families, with parents and carers, 360 communication. Please tell us if there's something you think we should know. Let's work together in order to secure the best outcomes. We have pupils at our school from 4 who go through to 18, 19-year-old. Everyone should feel known, liked and valued at Forest School, and we should be on that journey. Our house system is there to establish relationships with parents and carers over the 7 years in the senior school. So working really close together. And remember, the school is there to be professionally curious, never judgmental, and to act in the best interest of the children in our care. In order to do that, we have to work really closely with you as parents, carers. And Mrs. Milton stole my thunder right at the start. My main catchphrase, it is the most important thing we do. There's nothing more important in schools, which means that if at any point you would like to discuss any aspect of safeguarding child protection, please don't hesitate to get in touch. If it's specifically around your child, then do get in touch with the relevant people, what we refer to as a co-pastoral team, class teacher in the prep school, tutor, head of house in the senior school. If you would like to discuss any aspect of the management or the implementation of safeguarding child protection, please don't hesitate to contact me anytime. There's my direct email. It's always lovely to hear from parents and carers, and it's always good to be completely restless in this space. We can always improve, we can always learn, we can always identify things that we can do even better to secure the best outcomes for your young person. Thanks so much for joining me this evening. Mrs. Milton is going to pop up a feedback form when I close this slide, and we'll be so grateful to hear from you. Just to take 2 minutes to give us a little bit of feedback so we can make sure that this webinar series is exactly what you want it to be. Take care, and I look forward to seeing many of you in person soon.